This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Political comeback in Japan. The main opposition party picks former PM Yoshihiko Noda as its new leader amid looming elections as the ruling LDP prepares to replace unpopular Premier Fumio Kishida. Floods and landslides hit central Japan with several people dead and missing. The region reeling after torrential rain, including a record-breaking downpour. Pyongyang put on notice South Korea vows stern action if the North pushes on with its trash balloon campaign. And trade tensions between China and the EU intensifying, the bloc launching a challenge with the WTO against Beijing's initiation of an anti-subsidy probe into the region's dairy exports. Ahead on East Asia tonight, North Korea excelling at football. Its women's team beating Japan in the FIFA Under-20 World Cup to take home the trophy for the third time. And we take a closer look at a Japanese handmade craft that has been passed down for more than 1,000 years, as well as the efforts to keep the old tradition alive. Japan's biggest opposition party, the Constitutional Democrats, has elected former Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda as party president. Four candidates had run a tight race, with a runoff going between Mr. Noda and former Chief Cabinet Secretary and former party president Yukio Edano.
野田佳彦さんが立憲民主党代表に当選されました。おめでとうございます。
The new main opposition leader has been in politics a long time, having served as prime minister under the old Democratic Party of Japan. He has also been elected 9 times in the lower house since 1993. The ruling Liberal Democrats will elect its new president this Friday. Both ruling and opposition parties are preparing for a possible snap election that is expected to be called by Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's replacement as LDP chief. Mr. Kishida's party has mostly been in power since 1955, but the opposition is hoping that can change by promising to clean up the country's politics, just as the LDP was hit by a wave of scandals, as well as record-low approval ratings. And for more, CNA's Michio Ishida joins us live now from Tokyo. Michio, first up, what does Mr. Noda want to do? What does he want to achieve as new party president?
Well, Mr. Noda said in his speech that he wished to achieve what he wasn't able to do as Prime Minister of Japan. One of them is to reduce the number of seats in Parliament and cut costs. You see, he wants to win back public's trust to politics, which has been lost due to the ruling Liberal Democratic Party's political fund scandal. He also said that he wants to promote education opportunity for all people. And he said everyone should have access to basic services such as medical treatment and nursing care. It's as there's an issue of child poverty in Japan, especially in the single-parent household. And he wants to create a middle-class society in Japan. But his immediate target is the coming general election. And here's more from Mr. Noda.
私は本気で政権を取りに行く覚悟であります。戦いはもう今日から始まります。
Well, Mr. Noda said that a diet is expected to be convened on October the 1st, and a new prime minister is expected to be elected then. And after that, Mr. Noda will probably be clear with his strategy on how to face the new prime minister, which the LDP, the ruling party, will elect as their president, first of all, this Friday.
Mitch, I'm curious to know what exactly the critics are saying about CDP's prospect in the next general election.
Well, you know, the general election can happen any time after the new president of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party is elected. And many analysts here say that the CDP has a chance to win seats. Now, the party has been doing well in elections this year. It's won all 3 seats in the lower house by-elections and won many seats in local assembly elections. But the reason was not because a CDP had public support. The public basically voted against the ruling LDP, and that's because of the ruling party's political fund scandal, which came to light the end of last year. Now, over 80 Diet members received funds and did not report. And recently, 2 LDP lawmakers had to resign. And on top of that, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's new rule for disclosing political funds was too weak and it did not satisfy the public. So that's reflected badly on Mr. Kishida's cabinet's approval rating, according to a number of media polls. And so Mr. Kishida could not run in his party's presidential election coming up this Friday. Well, as to the constitutional Democrats, we've heard that they were actually about to split before this election. But because the election campaign turned out good for the 4 candidates, they were able to unite. And Mr. Noda is expected to appoint important party posts by Tuesday.
Also, Mitch, Mr. Noda, he was Prime Minister of Japan from 2011 to 2012. Not a very long period of time, but can you tell us more about his track record as Prime Minister then?
Well, to give you a little bit of background, back in 2009, the Democratic Party of Japan won the government. Then in 2011, if you can recall, March 11, magnitude 9 earthquake struck, triggering tsunamis and a nuclear crisis in Fukushima. And it's a year later that Mr. Noda was elected to office. Now, he was seen as stable in dealing with the reconstruction of the quake-hit areas, addressing nuclear contamination, and in international affairs, dealing with the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. But he's mostly remembered for deciding to raise sales tax from 5% to 8%, then to 10%. And it's not what Japan's prime minister wanted to do, because raising taxes is not popular with the public, although Japan needs more tax income to support its social welfare because of the aging society. So he tried to cut the cost of parliament by reducing the number of Diet members. And to call for the verdict of the public, he dissolved parliament, but lost the government. And the ruling party was back to the LDP led by Mr. Shinzo Abe. So his determination to win back the government is probably stronger than any other opposition party leaders. And he was actually persuaded by his party members this time to run for presidency, since he was back in the limelight for his eulogy for Mr. Shinzo Abe. As you recall, Mr. Abe was assassinated in 2022, and Mr. Noda was asked to represent the Diet members. And he talked about his rivalry against Mr. Abe, how they exchanged views privately, personal views, and they were quite heartwarming. And when he lost the general election, Mr. Abe, he recalled, came up to him, consoling him, saying he could have another chance like he himself did. And, Mr. Noda decided that he wanted to take this opportunity to win back the government. But for that, he will need support from other opposition parties, including the Japan Communist Party. And will he be able to give in on policies to regain the government and form an alliance with opposition parties? Oteli.
Thanks very much for that. Michio Ishida speaking to us live from Tokyo. Torrential downpours in central Japan have caused widespread river flooding and mudslides. Local media report that at least 7 people have died and at least 2 more are missing, and 5 others were grouped into a separate unaccounted for category, meaning they can't be reached for reasons that may be unrelated to the heavy rain and flooding. This is to allow emergency crew to better focus their efforts on the missing. Rescue personnel, meantime, are still combing through Ishikawa Prefecture's Wajima City. A father of a missing 14-year-old is among the crew, helping sift through debris washed away by floods. Heavy rain has been pounding the prefecture since Saturday. One city recorded more than 54 centimeters of rainfall in 72 hours. Now, this is the heaviest continuous rain since comparative data became available. Some 4,000 households are reportedly without power after the rain. More than 100 areas in the region have been isolated after roads were blocked due to landslides. Officials had issued emergency warnings for heavy rain of unprecedented levels and are now assisting with evacuations from affected areas. The region is still reeling from a magnitude 7.5 quake at the start of the year that toppled many buildings. A Japanese Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, has called for concrete actions to reform the United Nations Security Council during his address at the Summit of the Future at the UN headquarters in New York.
第一に、法の支配を貫徹することです。国連憲章の諸原則は我々の行動の根本的な指針です。力による一方的な現状変更の試みは世界のどこであれ許されません。法の支配に基づく自由で開かれた国際秩序こそが持続可能な開発を可能とし、繁栄をもたらすことができます。
In an apparent reference to the top UN body's failure to rein in Russia's war in Ukraine due to Moscow's veto power as a permanent member, the Japanese leader says the Security Council plays a vital role in international peace and security, adding that there is an urgent need to restore confidence in its effectiveness. Mr. Kishida also stressed the need for nuclear disarmament amid escalating tensions with potential atomic armed rivals such as China, North Korea, and Russia.
第4に核軍縮不拡散です。核軍縮をめぐる情勢は一層厳しさを増しています。しかし、核兵器のない世界への道のりがいかに厳しいものであったとしても、我々はその歩みを止めるわけにはいきません。
A General Assembly earlier approved a Pact of the Future. It's a document designed to turn promises made there into actions. World leaders are gathered for the two-day flagship event ahead of the annual UNGA High-Level Week, which Sally Patterson has more to tell.
World leaders here are calling this a pivotal moment for the United Nations. The two-day Summit of the Future comes 79 years after the world body was established. Now, heads of state, government and foreign ministers sat inside this historic hall have been tasked with giving it a refresh in the face of ever-growing criticism of the UN.
We are here to bring multilateralism back from the brink. I called for this summit to consider deep reforms to make global institutions more legitimate, fair and effective based on the values of the UN Charter. I called for this summit because 21st century challenges require 21st century solutions.
Addressing climate change, governing emerging technologies and overcoming geopolitical tensions were key issues addressed by speakers here.
At this critical juncture, strengthening solidarity, cooperation and mutual respect is essential. We must uphold international law and UN Charter and resolving disputes through peaceful means.
International peace and security was top of the agenda throughout the day, with conflicts from Ukraine to Gaza taking center stage.
Israel firmly believes that we cannot leave a legacy of fear, oppression and terror for future generations. We must act decisively against terrorist organizations that blatantly disregard the safety and welfare of their own people.
World leaders here also adopted the Pact for the Future. The 42-page document includes actions on issues such as eradicating poverty, mitigating climate change and achieving gender equality. On Monday, many more countries will have their own opportunity to address the General Assembly and outline their vision for what global governance should look like in 2024. Sally Patterson, CNA, at the United Nations headquarters in New York.
Tim Herschel-Burns, policy liaison for the Global Economic Governance Initiative at the Boston University Global Development Policy Center, weighs in on how the outcomes of the summit could shape the future of international diplomacy.
I think it's good to start with asking, why is this summit happening at all? Because, every year there's the UN General Assembly, but this event, the Summit of the Future, is a one-off event. It hasn't happened before, and it isn't scheduled to happen again. But it is happening because there's widely shared feeling that the international system isn't working. We saw a pandemic with extremely unequal effects. There are conflicts raging every year. The climate crisis gets worse and action is lagging. So there's this feeling that there needs to be something different to reshake the system and provide a new beginning. And so the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he especially led on leading to this summit happening. And it did result in the Pact for the Future. It's not a document that has tons of commitments that can just be completed tomorrow, but it's setting a big picture vision for international cooperation and the role of the United Nations. And it is something that's signed by the heads of state and government representing the peoples of the world. So it really gives a mandate going forward to reinvigorate international cooperation. When it comes to how do you get to those big outcomes, there it's a little bit more vague. And I think that is to some extent a sign of the still lack of total agreement amongst these major powers. But having committed to these big goals, it's essential that now in the aftermath of Summit of the Future, that these countries take their perspectives on issues like trade and economic cooperation and security and move them towards the outcomes that leaders committed to. And of course, that different countries, different superpowers are going to have different perspectives, but kind of the spirit coming out of the Summit of the Future is we are still committed to working together, even if we're coming from different places. And it will be a test of the ultimate outcome of the Summit of the Future, whether different powers, whether the international community can work in a cooperative manner towards the goals they just recommitted to.
A time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, China-EU trade tensions also intensifying on another front. European steel mills lobbying officials to tackle a surge in Chinese exports. And Samsung Electronics expanding its investment in Vietnam. It's set to build a multi-billion-dollar factory there. Stay tuned for all the details after the break. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight this Monday evening. Coming up next, we have Roland Lim who's standing by with the very latest in business news. And Roland, you're here to tell us all about the trade tensions between China and EU, and that's intensifying.
That's right, Oteli. The trade bloc has just involved the World Trade Organization. Now, European Commission has launched a legal challenge at the World Trade Organization against China's anti-subsidy probe on imports of certain dairy products from the bloc. Now, this is the first time the EU is challenging an investigation at the initiation stage. Now, China started its dairy investigation on the 21st of August, targeting liquid milk and cream with a fat content above 10%. Now, the probe also takes aim at various types of cheese from the EU. The world's second biggest economy announced the investigation more than a month after the EU confirmed hefty import tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles. More on the China-EU trade tensions, European steelmakers are urging officials to tackle a surge in Chinese exports, saying that this has driven regional prices below the cost of production. Now, one trade body argues that a fresh and comprehensive system of tariffs is needed to address the issue of global overcapacity and to protect European producers hit by weak demand and high energy costs. China is the world's biggest producer of steel, and its exports have been on the rise this year. The country expected to ship out more than 100 million tons of the metal, more than any year since 2016. Now, the burgeoning number has renewed trade tensions, spurring several countries to slap tariffs on Chinese steel. Now, since 2018, when the EU imposed safeguards on certain steel products, direct Chinese exports to the region have been small. But Europe's steel industry says it is suffering from the knock-on effects of an influx from elsewhere, as Chinese exports flood global markets, similar to the situation back in 2015 and 2016. Some say the subsidized below-cost Chinese exports threaten the sustainability of Europe's steel industry. And Europe's existing safeguards are due to expire in 2 years' time. Now, China announced plans for a rare briefing on the economy minutes before the central bank cut a short-term policy rate. Authorities said that the central bank chief and 2 officials will hold a press briefing tomorrow on financial support for the economy. Shortly after, the People's Bank of China lowered its 14-day reverse repurchase rate as part of cuts that began in July to support the economy. The rate now stands at 1.85% from 1.95% previously. It also injected about $10.6 billion of liquidity into the banking system. Now, today's rate cut gives a much-needed shot in the arm for the greater Chinese equities market. Mainland indices rose as investors are expecting more stimulus from tomorrow's briefing. The Shanghai Composite ending the day up 0.44%. Shenzhen Component, the second bourse, is up only 0.1%, 8,083 points. The Hang Seng Index, however, ending nearly flat after touching a 3-month high. Now, earlier, SEB's head of markets Asia, that's Sean Yokota, says that any form of stimulus measures in China should focus on propping up the property sector first.
I think markets are a little bit disappointed last week that those LPR rates weren't cut. But I think as we get into this week, now that China started to cut rates, I think that's kind of helped the sentiment a little bit. And maybe it is a way for China to say, like, we're not 100% dependent on the Fed. We don't have to move exactly right afterwards. Give it a little bit of time, and then we'll start to act and try to support the economy this way. But overall, I think the key focus is on the developer and the property that's having problems. I think that part needs to be really fixed in order for the Chinese economy to kind of rebound again and grow stronger. I think the biggest opportunities are still in manufacturing and exports. That's where the government wants to focus on and kind of take over the world production hub. As far as domestic consumption is concerned, I don't think China's really bought into the idea of providing national pension service or medical services that makes people reduce savings and consume. So until those things are fixed long term, I think still it is the production capital of the world where the opportunities are.
East Asian markets recouping from a lackluster morning ahead of a key U.S. inflation data, which could lift expectations for more rate cuts ahead. The yen getting some reprieve after weakening earlier today. The currency standing at around 143.44 to the dollar. It is strengthened 1/3% higher as we speak, while the Japanese equity markets closed for a public holiday. The Kospi in Seoul closed higher with the focus on U.S. data, outweighing news that South Korea's exports in the first 20 days of this month, declining 1.1% on year. Meantime, the Taiwan weighted index ending 0.57% higher. And we're seeing mixed trade for major semiconductor makers in Asia. Taiwan's TSMC closing up 0.4% higher. South Korea's Samsung Electronics down, though, 0.63%. 2 of the world's biggest chip makers are reportedly in talks to build manufacturing facilities in the United Arab Emirates, which could be worth more than $100 billion. The Wall Street Journal reports that top executives at TSMC have visited the UAE to look into building a manufacturing plant that's on par with its Taiwan facilities. Samsung Electronics, too, is reportedly looking into a major UAE factory. Now, these are still in the early stages. There are technical issues to consider, such as the availability of large amounts of water and engineering talent. But the plans are part of the UAE's drive to boost AI investment in the country, as the region seeks to diversify its economies away from oil reliance. For the 2 chip giants, the discussions could help expand their manufacturing capacity amid increasing demand for advanced AI chips. It also opens up a new wave of investment after growth driven by government subsidies in the US, Europe, and in Asia. A slew of other Middle Eastern nations are also trying to ride the AI boom. Now, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar have reportedly been key backers of AI companies through their sovereign wealth funds. Samsung Electronics is planning to expand its investment in Vietnam, injecting $1.8 billion for a factory in the northern Vietnam state this year. Now, this plant will produce OLED displays for automobiles and technology equipment. The new facility will be built in a province east of Hanoi and close to an existing Samsung plant, bringing the South Korean electronic manufacturer's total investment in the area to $8.3 billion. Now, over the last decade, the Southeast Asian country has emerged as one of the most attractive production hubs for electronics companies. And you're up to date with the business news. Okay.
Thanks so very much, Roland, for the business report. Well, time now for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Japanese and Chinese officials are due to meet separately, both in Beijing and New York, to discuss Wednesday's fatal stabbing of a schoolboy in Shenzhen. And Sri Lanka swears in its new left-leaning president, who vows to restore public faith in politics in the debt-ridden country. Political comeback in Japan. The main opposition party picks former Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda as its new leader amid looming elections as a ruling LDP prepares to replace unpopular Premier Fumio Kishida. Floods and landslides hit central Japan, with several people dead and missing. The region reeling after torrential rain, including a record-breaking downpour. And trade tensions between China and the EU intensifying, the bloc launching a challenge with the WTO against Beijing's initiation of an anti-subsidy probe into the region's dairy exports. Japanese Vice Foreign Minister Yoshifumi Suge is in Beijing to discuss Wednesday's fatal stabbing of a schoolboy in Shenzhen. Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa will also be meeting her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on this issue on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Well, after the attack last week, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida demanded an explanation from China, urging it to ensure the safety of Japanese citizens in the country. Beijing earlier had expressed regret and sadness for what it called an isolated incident that could happen in any country. Japanese media reported that the victim was a 10-year-old Japanese national living in Shenzhen, and Beijing's foreign ministry said that his parents were Japanese and Chinese citizens. Chinese police have detained a 44-year-old man suspected of stabbing the child. While the motive is unclear, the attack happened to coincide with the anniversary of the Mukden incident, in which Japan used the destruction of a railway section as a pretext for its 1931 invasion of Manchuria. China has urged people to remain vigilant following accusations that Taiwan's military supports a hacking group known as Anonymous 64 in carrying out cyber attacks against Beijing. Well, the group believed to be a part of Taiwan's cyber warfare wing, which Beijing says uploads and broadcasts content that, quote, denigrates the mainland's political system and major policies. The Taiwanese Defense Ministry rejected those allegations in a statement and argued that China, through the use of its cyber attacks and military harassment, was the real disturber of peace. A Chinese government report says the group has been carrying out cyber attacks since earlier this year, and this includes seizing control of portal websites, outdoor electronic billboards, and video-on-demand platforms in China, Hong Kong, and Macau. The report adds that hacking activities include the spreading of false information and creating rifts in the public. South Korea's military has warned of stern measures if Pyongyang crosses the line with its ongoing trash balloon campaign. The South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff vowed to take action if serious danger is caused to the safety of its citizens. Some 120 trash balloons were detected floating across the border into the south from Sunday evening to Monday morning. Since May, the North has launched more than 5,000 balloons filled with trash on around 22 occasions, disrupting flights, hitting government buildings, and even causing fires. Pyongyang says the move is in retaliation to anti-North Korea leaflets sent across the border by South Korean activists. The military has refrained from directly shooting down the balloons over public safety concerns. Instead, Seoul has resorted to blasting daily anti-North Korean propaganda broadcasts through loudspeakers located on the border. And now, some headlines from media outlets in East Asia. Kyodo News says that Tokyo has sacked the captain of a Japanese destroyer that sailed into China's waters in July. Officials assured Beijing that the Japanese destroyer did so accidentally, despite repeated warnings from the Chinese Navy. South Korean government data predicts that its population is set to shrink by over 30% in the next 50 years. That's according to a Yonhap report. A rapidly aging population, coupled with falling birth rates and a tough economic climate, is blamed for the predicament. Also in South Korea, police say that today they're investigating 74 suspects on charges of distributing deep fake pornography. This follows a commitment by police to crack down on AI-related sex crimes. Anura Kumara Dissanayake has been sworn in as Sri Lanka's new president. The left-leaning leader vows to revive the country's fragile economy, but says that he has no magic solution to the hardships.
පියමන් කළ හැකි දෙයක් කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද මා මීට පෙරත් ප්‍රකාශ කළා තියෙන මා ඉන්ද්‍රජාලිකයෙක් නොවේ. මා මැජික් කරුවෙක් නොවේ. මා මේ රටේ පුදුණු සාමාන්‍ය පුරවැසියෙක්. හැකියාවන් තිබෙනවා නොහැකියාවන් තිබෙනවා. දන්න දේවල් තිබෙනවා නොදන්න දේවල් තිබෙනවා.
The 55-year-old took his oath in the island nation's capital, Colombo, a day after emerging victorious in the presidential election held over the weekend. He succeeds outgoing President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who took office at the peak of the financial crisis in 2022. Now, many see Mr. Disanayake's leadership as an opportunity for a fresh start.
බලාපොරොත්තු සිද්ධ වුණා අවශ්‍යලා තියෙන්නේ මේ කඩාවැටි රට ගොඩනගන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ආර්ථික වශයෙන් ගොඩනගන්න ආර්ථිකය. විශේෂයෙන්ම ආර්ථිකය සදාචාරය සමෘද්ධිය ජනතාවගේ දුක ඇති කරන පාලනයක් තමයි අපි අවශ්‍යලා තිබෙන්නේ. අඩු වෙන අඩු වෙලා මේ ආර්ථිකය දුප්පත් මිනිස්සුගේ ආර්ථික නගා සිටවන්න ඕනේ. ඒක තමයි අපේ ප්‍රධානම බලාපොරොත්තුව.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has congratulated Mr. Dissanayake on his inauguration. According to state media CCTV, Mr. Xi says he is willing to work together to enhance mutual political trust and hopes that bilateral cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative would, quote, bear more fruit. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says the country is willing to play a constructive role in Sri Lanka's economic and social development. Beijing is one of Colombo's largest bilateral creditor, accounting for nearly half of the $10.6 billion that Sri Lanka has borrowed from other countries. China last year agreed to restructure $4.2 billion of debt. And now that Mr. Dissanayake has been sworn in, correspondent Manishka Boam tells us what's next for his presidency.
Well, Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena and his cabinet has already resigned. So it is likely that a new cabinet will be formed soon. And at some point in the coming days, we will see the dissolution of Parliament. Though the current Parliament's tenure will only be coming to an end at the end of 2025, it's unlikely Dissanayake will be able to implement his program with them. Therefore, Disanayake's party currently, despite having only 3 MPs, are seeking to go for an election. Because he has said that just as being elected is important, it's also important to secure power. So he has maintained that he will dissolve Parliament and call for elections. However, it's also likely, the NPP only has a very few known faces when it comes to politics. And it's likely that these NPP members will be elected to Parliament. But if they are able to get a majority of seats in Parliament, has now been raised as a concern. However, when Disanayake's win was announced at the Election Commission yesterday, we did see that the opposition leader, Sajid Premadasa, who was just defeated by Dissanayake, coming out to extend his party and his support to the president. But what the makeup of the next government will be is yet to be seen.
Earlier, my colleague Yasmin Lankas spoke to Pakiyasoti Saravanamutu. He's founder and executive director of the Center for Policy Alternatives. And he tells us more about what challenges Mr. Disanayake's non-political elite background poses to his immediate priorities.
Well, Mr. Dissanayake has said that he will call for the dissolution of Parliament and go for a general election soon thereafter. So by early December, we should have a new Parliament, and hopefully the Parliament that will support him to carry out his policies. Yes, he might face a challenge with regard to the bureaucracy, but I think some of them may well come over because it's going to be, in the first instance, an interim government. The challenges overall are very, very large insofar as it's alleviating the pain, the suffering of people due to the austerity after the collapse of the economy. It is also about finding ways in which the welfare, the alleviating that is going to, the money is going to be found to do so. And I think that's a big question. Where is the money going to come for growth? We are not going to pay back our debts for another 5 years. And in that period, we have to get the money to do so. The other one, of course, is corruption. Mr. Dissanayake, in terms of the election campaign, made corruption up front and central a key theme. And so the question is, does he have enough evidence to convict a big fish, as it were, and put them behind bars within 6 months to a year? Or is it the case that he does not have it, but nevertheless there's a public demand to do something demonstrably, and that therefore he'll go for an extrajudicial mechanism?
Well, in terms of alleviating the pain of the population, the financial pain, and trying to grow businesses, he has a plan. I mean, in his speech just under an hour ago, he said industrialists and entrepreneurs have great responsibility in rebuilding Sri Lanka, and he hopes that they can extend support. And he slated manufacturing, agriculture, and IT sectors. Are these the most ideal, you feel, for the Sri Lankan population and the economy?
Yes, I mean, I think we're moving into we've moved into a digital age, and we must avail ourselves of those opportunities. Mr. Dissanayake has talked about where he would want to go. As you said, he will talk about the digital age, he will talk about manufacturing industries and all of that. But the devil might well be in the detail. How is he going to do that? Where is the money going to come from? And he comes in with a team that hasn't really been tested in government, leave aside being tested by this major crisis that's facing us. So there are concerns. Concerns continue to exist, I guess, with regard to the competence, with regard to the expertise, with regard to the experience of his team.
And in the past, a lot of that money poured in from China. Sri Lanka, a major recipient of Chinese investment. And the president-elect's party was very quick to reassure India that his administration wouldn't be caught up in geopolitical rivalry. How do you see this panning out?
Well, I think it will be a continuation of the previous government's foreign policy in that both India and China have stakes with regard to Sri Lanka. They have interests, and those interests are underpinned by a great deal of investment. And so I think it's a policy that is going to navigate between the two and keep both of them happy. I don't think Mr. Disanayake's foreign policy is going to be pro-one as opposed to the other. It'll try to maintain friendship with all countries as long as the investment keeps flowing.
Now, here's more on the background of Sri Lanka's new president. Mr. Dissanayake may lack political pedigree, but he is not without government experience. In fact, he's been a member of parliament since the year 2000 and even ran for president in 2019, where he garnered only 3% of votes. Mr. Dissanayake first dabbled in politics as a student leader in the late 1980s. The reputation of his Marxist political party, the JVP, had been tainted by an armed revolt, which is believed to have claimed thousands of lives. Well, he has since risen to the party's leadership and apologized for the bloody period. His party and its alliance rose to prominence in 2022 during the mass movement that overthrew the Rajapaksa government. Mr. Dissanayake presented himself as pro-poor and anti-corruption, and it resonated strongly with voters. Now he wants a clean slate and a fresh mandate. He's vowed to dissolve parliament within 45 days of taking office, and has also pledged to develop the manufacturing, agriculture and IT sectors to help revive the economy. Coming up on East Asia tonight, a dominant force emerges in Japan's traditional wrestling sumo as a relative newcomer makes history by climbing to the sport's second highest rank in record time. And turning to sports news now, North Korea defeated Japan 1-0 in the FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup finals held on Sunday in Colombia, snagging the team their third ever championship title. Well, the DPRK star player, 17-year-old Cho Il-sun, scored the winning goal just 15 minutes after kickoff. Japan was unable to break the team's ironclad defense, which held steady for the rest of the game. Cho also walked away with a coveted Adidas Golden Boot, an award granted to the top goal scorer in the tournament. North Korea had previously defeated the United States, the world's top-ranked team, in the semi-finals, after handily beating fan favorites, including the Netherlands and Brazil, in the earlier stages. Now, fans of Japanese traditional wrestling, also known as sumo, were thrilled by a remarkable finish over the weekend when 24-year-old Onosato clinched his second Empress Cup in just 5 top division tournaments. He's set to be officially promoted to sumo's second highest rank, Ozeki, after winning 34 bouts in 3 consecutive tournaments. Onosato's Ozeki achievement comes at an unprecedented pace. He only stepped into the professional sumo ring last year and has gone through 9 tournaments since his debut, winning 2 at the highest level. And most sumo wrestlers toil through their entire careers, some more than 15 years long, without winning a single tournament. As amazing as this feat is to sumo watchers, observers believe the Ishikawa native is set for greater heights. The Japanese traditional craft of creating tamari, or handcrafted embroidered balls, is at risk of dying out. But a group of women in the southwestern island of Shikoku are determined to preserve the intricate art form, one stitch at a time.
Though this ball may only be the size of an orange, it could take months to finish. It's called a tamari, a Japanese traditional craft that's been passed down for more than 1,000 years. The concept behind tamari is an elegant otherworldliness, an impractical beauty that's very labor-intensive to create. Each one is made by hand, requiring much time and meticulous attention to detail. Some cost thousands of dollars, although most are much cheaper. The arduous process begins by placing rice husks that are cooked and then dried in a piece of cotton. Thread is wound over and over the mold until it turns into a ball. Then the stitching begins. The balls are surprisingly hard, requiring a concentrated, almost painful push for each and every stitch. Today, only several dozen people, all women, can make the tamari balls to traditional standards.
一番後継者ですよね。難しいというか、それを育てるっていうことがやっぱり10年以上やっぱりかかるので、それまでにこう長くやっぱり続けてくださる方々がいるっていうことが大切ですね。
Aiko Araki is a master tamari artist who wants to keep the tradition alive. She gives lessons in her studio, which also serves as the head office for Tamari's Preservation Society, and she often travels to Tokyo to teach. She's also come up with new designs to keep the art form relevant to modern times, inventing an aromatic diffuser tamari and creating affordable miniature ones that can be used as Christmas ornaments.
何にもないところから何かこんな美しいものが生み出されて、それがみんなに喜ばれるっていうことが手まりで、手でなければ作れない美しいものが世の中にはたくさんあるんですよっていうことを言いたいです。私は手まりを通して。
The recent shocking news of an Indian tourist falling into a sinkhole in Kuala Lumpur has dominated our news and social media feeds. But how does the ground beneath our feet suddenly give way and swallow a whole person? Well, on the latest episode of Talking Point, Diana Sir digs into the earth to find out what's behind these sudden sinkholes and whether they can happen in Singapore as well.
Dr. Goh Tian Lai has been researching disasters like landslides, floods and sinkholes.
This sinkhole actually is a human-induced, actually caused by burst pipe and tunneling activity. When she fall inside the hole, imagine that you are falling from 24 feet, 8 meters. Then sure you have an injured, then she have a less strength to hold on the pipe or any area that can hold her. And actually on the time, she did scream for help. Then I think for a few minutes, she been flown away by the fast travel water and the waves.
So why is it that her body has not been found yet?
Difficult to say, but most likely her body is inside one of the pipe, which been blocked, and then the diver or the rescuer unable to reach the area.
Was there any sign on the ground at all that there might be a dangerous spot there?
Yeah, it's let's look back. There's a video. The first video have been posted inside the media. there's one woman and one man walk first. She's number 3. From the video, we can see that this man go left. We suspect that this man saw some sign that make him move to left.
Right, what you're saying is that the man who, whether consciously or not, avoided that area.
Yes.
A second sinkhole opened up very near from here. Could the 2 sinkholes be linked?
Yes. We suspect that the activity of the rescue, such as we have a heavy machinery, this machinery have a vibration and then disturb the location nearby, so that it's isolate the sinkhole, and then this is why, because all the soil and then have been loosened, then it collapsed.
You're scaring me. Okay, is it possible if we walk around, are you able to spot the hot spots, so to speak?
Yes, let's go.
Okay.
Diana, I have this. I want to show you some hotspot.
Okay.
Okay. You look at Diana here.
Oh.
All is hollow and then it's not stable.
Okay.
However, this one have a very huge deformations.
I'm going to come round to that side, to you. I'm not going to step on that. So what you are saying is that this area there's deformation. To me, it just looks like uneven tiles, right? But what you are saying is that you shouldn't step on deformations like this.
Yes, exactly.
Dr. Goh brings me around the Jalan Masjid India area in search of other telltale signs.
Diana, see, this is hollow, and then the hollow is not good. And this is solid, so meaning down there is very good.
Whoa, look at that.
So Diana, this is the worst spot. Why? Because you have 2 manholes, then the area is big, and the surface, look at that, is very uneven. So the people should try to avoid step on these locations.
I sometimes see build traffic with vehicles stopping right on top of that space. Should this space be cordoned off?
I think the big vehicle, there's no much issues unless the hole is very big. Then it still have a chance for the people to escape from the vehicle.
Finally, do you have any tips for me? How can I spot a potential sinkhole?
Yeah, first thing, don't use your phone while you are walking. Okay. Second, then we look for there's a potential tensile crack, and nearby there's any tilted object. And lastly, we see the deformations from the ground.
Don't use your phone while walking. That is just a simple excerpt of the latest episode of Talking Point on sinkholes. And you can also view the show on CNA Video on Demand on MeWatch and CNA Insider's YouTube channel. And on that note, it is time to wrap up Monday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Also look us up on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Thanks for watching.